Shall we begin? Michael Ritter graduated from St. Edward's in 1977. At St. Edward's, he knew of his wife, Barbara Kent, who was the student secretary for Sister Anne Crane, who at that time was head of humanities. They didn't really meet until after graduation. Michael was a political science major who also had, and still does, a penchant for writing, for he had worked at one time on a novel about figures, bringing in different chapters for his peer critiques. Nowadays, both Michael and his wife Barbara are in social services, which speaks well of St. Ed's mission and the emphasis on the mind will not be educated at the expense of the heart. As Sister Anne Crane believes, the student has become the teacher. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Michael Ritter.
Great to be here. I hardly recognize the place. I graduated in '77 when Moody was the new building on campus. We really wanted to get started here tonight. Just I really want to thank St. Ed's first off for allowing us to have this meeting here. And I also wanted to thank Anne Crane, who's right here, my creative writing instructor, mainly because she was very enthusiastic about my kind of free-form writing style that I had back then. And she also forgave a lot of my phonically spelled words. To this day, I don't know how to spell Puerto Rico except for P-O-R-T-A. We're actually here tonight, of course, to discuss brats, and I don't mean Paris Hilton and that crowd. I mean the military brats. How many brats are here? How many people are? Whoa! This is great. This is great. So you all know what it's like to grow up in a khaki-colored world. You know what it's like to stop at 5 o'clock, no matter where you are on base, because it's that the Pledge of Allegiance starts, and you don't stop. And you also know what it's like to realize that hometowns are really something that only existed on television. Our hometowns were wherever we planted, wherever our family took us. That's where we lived. I gotta tell you, I loved being a brat. I really did. And I think, you know, we are a subculture of the American experience here. But like any subculture, people tend to think that we're all the same. They tend to pigeonhole everybody who was a military brat. And we're really not. We've all had individual experiences, and we've all had individual stories to tell. So with that, you know, caveat, I recently wrote a book called The Brat Chronicles, Stories from the Demilitarized Zone. I don't mean that line that separates North and South Korea. I mean the demilitarized zone that was in living rooms, and youth centers, and churches, and movie theaters, on base housing all around the world. Those are the stories that we have to tell. And those are the ones that I've laid out in the book here. Excuse me, I keep referring to my notes a bit. Like I said, I love being a military brat. It gave me a chance to look at new horizons, to look at different cultures. I will say that my father was very lucky. We only had 5 tours of duty in his whole 20 years in the service. 2 of those in Germany, one in Bremerhaven, one in Ramstein. One in California from '66 to '70, which was great. It was the time to be in California, and believe me, this was a land of hippie uprisings and bronze babes, and I loved it. And then back to that, we went from there, I'd say, back to Ramstein. And I had a wonderful experience going to Ramstein. I was in high school then. There wasn't a high school on the base then. We had to be shipped to Kaiserslautern, caught a bus every day to K-Town. And if anybody was in base housing, they know base housing is a big building with 18 apartments in it and a bunch of families with a bunch of kids sharing in a very small place. When we lived in Ramstein, we had maids' rooms, which was at one time was where people could have live-in maids, and they were in the basement. My parents saw that as an opportunity to put their pain in the ass kid in the basement, and that's where I actually lived. That was my bedroom. And it was wonderful. I had a lot of freedom. My parents trusted me, which they've since reading the book realizing probably they shouldn't have. But it was a really good experience, and I enjoyed it very much. I just want to touch a few things about military. The first years I know, from my own experience, was the roughest. I can remember my dad getting a phone call. We lived in Clovis, New Mexico, and Dad would get phone calls in the middle of the night saying, come on down to the flight line. And we just sent him off with his duffel bag, not really knowing where he was going. And this was in Clovis, New Mexico, about the time at the height of the communists. Roswell had just taken place, so we never knew if Dad was going off to fight the Red Scare or to make sure the aliens weren't taking over the country. But it didn't really matter because we knew he was coming back. And in the interim, all the families would get their resources together, we'd all pool everything, and then we'd get together. The Brat families are the most cohesive, supportive group I've ever known. They really stood up for each other. And it was, again, it was a wonderful experience. It wasn't always good. Dad, at one time, got a TDY tour for a year away, and left us in Keokuk, Iowa. And believe me, the only thing happening in Keokuk, Iowa is like nothing. So if you wanted to spend a year in Keokuk, Iowa, I wouldn't recommend it. But it's where my parents lived, and my mother was raised there. So we landed literally on my grandparents and stayed with them. Which is not unusual, I'm sure. As fathers get transferred, families go home. And that's where we would stay with my grandparents periodically throughout every transition. Often the military would send Dad ahead, and he'd have to find a place for us to live because I was a family with 7 people, including Mom and Dad. The military is real hip on telling Dad where to go, but they're not real hip on telling you where you're going to live once you get there. So he would find us places on the economy, in Germany particularly, and we would get in a house and move into Germany. And that was a wonderful experience living on the economy as well. There was also a lot of financial difficulties, and I'm sure that's not unique to the military experience where Dad always had to have 2 jobs. My father was a master sergeant, a supply sergeant, which led to a lot of interesting exchanges. You know, if we needed a turkey, the dog might come up missing, but he'd come home with a turkey. So, yeah, again, he loved what he did, and he had 2 jobs all the time. So there was always a job he could get at the movie theater, or a job he could get selling stereo equipment. Mom would sell Avon. We always were working all the time. And if I could just take a minute, if you will indulge me, I just want to say thank you, Mom and Dad. They're here from Midland. And I really appreciate it. How many people here who are brats actually served, went into the military? A lot less hands. I was the only one of all my classmates who didn't join the service. And they tell me about it to this day, that I didn't join the service. The reason I didn't was manifold. One, Nixon had just ended the draft, so I didn't think, geez, why am I going if I don't have to? But the real important issue for me was the bathrooms. There was no way I was going to be in the military and sit in a stall in the bathrooms. It just wasn't going to happen. So that was one of the main reasons. I know it sounds silly, but to this day, I locked the bathroom door and went home alone. So there was no way I was going to do that with a bunch of people. I'm also often asked what attributes did I carry with me through life that I could contribute to growing up as a military brat. And primarily it is to accept and appreciate every moment for that moment when you're in it. Because as a military brat, you never knew when Uncle Sam was going to come calling, and you were going to have to say goodbye to places you loved and people you loved. And in the military, that usually meant forever. So again, I've taken that with me. When I meet people today, I really appreciate them because again, you just never know. The offside of that is it's very easy for me to say goodbye. I found that to be. So when I say goodbye to somebody, I always just assume I'm never going to see you again. I appreciate you. It was great knowing you. Bye-bye. And here I am, 52 years old, and I still kind of look at life that way. But what it really boils down to is it's not really about us. It's about our parents. You know, we exist because they exist. And we were in the environment we were in because that's the environment we had. I didn't know any better. I figured everybody lived this way. Everybody lived out of a suitcase for 3 or 4 weeks every time they moved. And everybody, you know, ate on little plastic plates that the military would provide. And everybody had this olive drab furniture that the military gave. That's just the way it was. So when people, my civilian friends ask me, didn't you hate moving around? I say, no, I loved it. I really did. I enjoyed meeting new people. I enjoyed the opportunity to be somebody else when I moved to a different base, because all that baggage I had at the last one, I could go up there and say, oh, that didn't even exist. So you can be somebody new every time you get it. So there is that connection to it. And with that in mind, what it really boils down to, and one of the reasons I'm so happy to hook up with Donna Musil and her documentary here, is because it is about families. It is about growing up as a brat. And it really delves a little deeper about what makes us the way we are. And so with that, it's with no small amount of admiration that I want to bring Donna Musil up to introduce you to, show the documentary. When it's through, she and I will be available. We'll talk some more about it. Thank you.